Watch, learn, and we'll be a star freelancer. 24-hour live stream. Save time and money. 100+ free videos and free books with source code, materials, and resources. Starfreelancer.eu.
In this video, we are going to create a new component that will allow us to centralize all of these operations that we're doing here for editing an entity. The idea is that in the future, we will be editing actors, movie theaters, and movies, and so we want to reuse as much code as we can. So we're going to create a new component that will have all of these operations in it, and then we're just going to consume this component from here. So let's do that. Let me go to the Explorer, and in here I want to go to utils, right click on utils, new file, and I will call it edit entity.tsx, enter. Let me minimize this and let's get to work. Let me say export default function edit entity, and we're going to have a few parameters. So edit entity props, curly brackets here, return, and parentheses here. Now let's see what we have to do. First, let me say interface edit entity props, and let's implement this step by step. So first I want to grab all of this, I will cut all of this, and I want to pass it here above the return. Then let's see what else we have. We have this logic for displaying the loading component if the genre hasn't been loaded, and also the display errors component and a title. I want to take all of that, cut, and paste it here in the return. Now, of course, this is not a component for just editing genres, but it is about editing whatever. So we need to generalize almost all of this. So let's see what we can do. So first we have this use params control dot here to import that is easy, and also the use state and use history and use effect and Axios. I'm just importing these dependencies. Now let me import Axios from Axios. Let me also import Axios response. Let's come here and import that and import URL genre. So URL genres, this should be like this, from endpoints. And now let's see what else we can do. So here we have genre and set genre. This is not correct because we cannot have a reference to genres here. So let me say entity and set entity. And this shouldn't be genre creation DTO, but T creation. What is T creation? What we're going to do, since in this component we're going to work with different data type, is that we're going to use generics. With generics we can pass types as parameters. So here I can say T creation, and now there are no errors here. And this means that now I can use this component with actors, genres, movies, and so on. I just have to pass the data type that I want to use. Now, of course, these URL genres shouldn't be here, so I shouldn't have imported that. Let me delete that. This should be a parameter. So I will say props URL, and let me create that prop right now. So I will come here and I will say URL string. This will be a parameter because every entity will have its own parameter. Now here we are going to be getting not a creation but a DTO related to reading. So I'll just call it tRead, and I will copy this and put it here as a generic parameter for our component. And here I will say set entity, but if this is tRead and entity is tCreation, and entity is tCreation because we're going to pass that entity into our genre form in this case, right? So what we're going to do is that we are going to introduce another parameter, which is going to be a function called transform, and we're going to receive an entity here of type tRead, and we're going to return a tCreation as response. So semicolon here. And of course, we now need to pass here at creation and at read. This should be capital R. And now we have to pass this t creation and t read here in props. So let me put this here and let me put this in another line so that you can visualize everything better. And now in here in set entity, I will cut this and say props transform and paste response data here. And now as you can see, we don't have any errors here. Now let's go down here because I want to create a default implementation for the transform function, because most times this is just going to be a simple transformation of one type to the other without changing any specific values of any property. So let me say edit entity default props equal to transform entity any and entity, and that's it. Now I can go up and continue working. This edit function is going to be of type t creation. This genre to edit will be entity to edit, and here I'm going to pass props URL, and here entity to edit, and that is fine. This is working as you can see. Now we need to work with this. So we have edit genre here. I want to have this genre as a parameter, so I will say here props entity name, and let me copy this and let's paste it here, a string, and now this should be working. And I need to put here a fragment, so a fragment here. Let me cut this and paste that here. So now we don't have any errors here. Now I need to import display errors, so let's come up and let me say import display errors from utils display errors, semicolon here. Now let's go down here, and this is fine. Now let's work on this. This shouldn't be genre but entity, and we need to import loading. So let me import loading. Let me just clone this and say loading here and loading here. Now that is also working. Now we need to work with this genre form. Of course, this genre form should come from the parent component, because it is the parent component that is going to say, hey, I want to use the genre form component or the movies form component or the actors form component and so on. So this should be a parameter. So let me cut all of this from here, and I want to say props children entity and edit. Why do I want to pass the entity and the edit function into this children function that we have here? Well, that is because we need the entity so that we can pass that entity, for example, to the genre form component. Okay, and what about edit? The edit is because I need to be able from the parent component to invoke this edit function that we have here. So that is why I need to pass it as a parameter to the parent component. And because children is a function, I can say here children entity t creation edit, which will be a function that will receive an entity as a parameter. T creation will be its type and will return void, and this will return React element, semicolon here. Control dot here to import React element. So what we're saying here is that our children function will receive an entity which is of type t creation and an edit function which is of type a function that receives a t creation and returns nothing. This is void. This is why we have void here, and React element so that we can put here the rendering of our form component, for example, of our genre form component. Now, before we go to the parent component, here we have this. It says we are missing a dependency, but I don't want to list props as a full dependency, so I will just disable for this line this. So save, and we are good to go here. Now let's go to edit genre, and let's work on using that edit entity component. And let me say here edit entity, close here, and here I will say entity and edit. and let me pass this here, and in here I will paste my genre form. Now this should be entity here, and then I need to import my edit entity component. So import edit entity from utils edit entity semicolon. Now I need to pass the generics, so I need to pass here genre creation DTO and genre DTO, and of course I need to import genre DTO, which we haven't import, so that is good. Now I need to pass a few parameters like URL, which comes from URL genres, which we are importing here. Then we have entity name, so entity name, which is going to be genres, and that is good. Now let me see something here. Let's see that if we come here, we have genres here hard-coded. I need to have this as a parameter, so props index URL. So copy here, and let me come here, and let me say here index URL string, and that should be enough. Let me say Control F genre, and now we don't have any mention of genre in this component. Now let's go back here, and let me say index URL, and here I want to say /genres, and that should be it. That should be enough. I should be able to save here and also delete all of this, so Alt-Shift-O to remove all of the unused imports. Now let me save, and let's see what we have. Let me go to Google Chrome and let me refresh just in case. Let me say edit. We have action 2, save changes, and we have action 2, edit one more time, remove that 2, and we are good to go. Let's see that we have edit here, edit genres, and I want to see if I write to here, save, we have edit genres to here. So indeed we are using our edit entity component. And as you can see, now in the future when we want to edit an entity, we only have to use this small component that we have here. And we don't have to be repeating all of the code that we need for implementing, updating an entity. In this video, we want to centralize the main logic of our index genres component. The idea is that in the future, we're going to have an index of actors and an index of movie theaters and so on. And those will have pagination and things like that. So what we want to do is to have all of that logic inside of a component so that we can reuse that logic for the different indices of our React application. So let's do that. Let's go to the Explorer and let's go to utils, right click, new file, index entity.tsx, enter, and let's get to work. Let me say export default function index entity, and just like we did with the edit entity, we're going to receive a generic parameter here. We're going to say props index entity props. Also, we're going to receive the generic parameter over there, curly brackets, return, and let's get to work. So first, let me implement this interface. So interface T, and in here we're going to have several parameters, but let's first cut all of this from here. We need to take all of this, cut, and let me come here to index entity and let me paste that here. I also want to come back here and see what else I can take. I want to take all of this from here, cut, and let's go back here. Let's go to the return statement. Let's put a fragment here and let me paste this here. Okay, so let's come back here and let's see that we have this generic list component here. And we also have this logic inside of it. So what I want to do is that I want to keep this here. I want to keep the t-head and the t-body here, but I want to take the generic list and the table over to my index entity component. So what I want to do is that I will just copy it. I will copy everything from here, and I will come back here and I will put it here, and then I will delete the t-body and the t-head and we'll just leave that table. But one final thing that I want to do is that these two buttons, the edit and delete button, are going to be repeated in every index. So I want to cut this from here and put it here also. I will put it here. Const buttons equal to, let me put a function here and then a fragment here, and I will paste this here, and let's start working. So there are many things that we need to correct, as you can see. So let me start with importing useState. This should be the generic type T, and this is enough here. Let me import useEffect, and this is fine. We have Axios, we need to import Axios, so let me import it manually. So let me say import Axios from Axios, and let me also import Axios response. Let me put this here, and that is fine. Let me say here T, this should be T, and this is good. This is fine. This genres shouldn't be genres but entity, so F2 entity, entities should be plural, and also here F2 set entities, enter, and that is great. Now we have these URL genres. This should be a parameter, so props.url, and let me put that as a parameter here, URL string. Now this is great. Now let's come up, and this is working. Now let's come down here, and in here we have the same thing. We have to say here props URL, and that way we will be able to delete whatever entity, and this should be delete entity, not genre, so entity here. Now let's come down here and let's work with the buttons. Let me import link. Let me import link here. Import link from React router DOM, semicolon here, and that is done. Now here we have genre ID, and here we have genres. So this will be a URL that will have to come from the parent component. So what I will do is that I will put this as a parameter, edit URL, that the parent component will be able to send. So a string. Now let me say here to edit URL, and that is great. Now button, I need to import button, so let's do that right away. Import button from button, semicolon here. Let's go back here, and let me put this around here. Now we have the custom confirm, which we can import, and the delete entity. This is now called delete entity. And genre ID, the ID will also be a parameter here, so I will say ID number, and in here I will pass just ID. Okay, this is great. This is looking better. We have less errors. Now let me import this and pagination and generic list. Let me import all of that right away. So import this from records per page select. Let me say the same for pagination. Let me do the same for pagination, and also generic list, and here I will say generic list. Okay, so we don't have any errors here anymore, but we haven't finished yet. Here, let's go up. We have genres. This should be a prop, so props title, and let me put title here in the interface, title string, semicolon here, and this is great. Create genre shouldn't be genre, and this URL also have to be a parameter. So we're going to have here props create URL. So let me copy this and come here. I can put it here, string, semicolon here, and also this genre should be the entity name, so props entity name, and let me put this in another line. So entity name, let me put that here, a string also, semicolon here, and this is good. So let's come down here, and we need to work with this. So we need to say here props children, and we're going to say entities bank, comma, buttons. So what are we doing here? Well, we're saying props children because we want to be able to pass content here as a parameter from the parent component, and in here we're saying entities and this exclamation mark. because entities can be undefined, I need to pass this because I know that it won't be undefined. And buttons, because I need that the parent component has access to these buttons that I built here. So now let me define this parameter here. And I want to say here, children, entities, t array, and buttons, which will be a function with edit URL as the first parameter, which is a string, ID as the second parameter, which is a number, which returns a React element, and then we want to say React element here. Control dot, because I want to import React element. So buttons is a function that returns a React element, and children is a parameter that also returns React element. That is why we have two React elements here. And that should be enough here. I think, let me say genre here, and there is no genre mentioned here, so good. Now let's go back to index genres and let's get to work here. I need to use my new index entity component, so let me say here index entity. Let me close this like this, and in here I want to pass a generic parameter, genre DTO, and then I want to pass a few parameters. The first one is going to be URL, which is going to be URL genres, then create URL, which is going to be genres create, which is the URL for creating a genre. Then we're going to say title, genres, entity name, genre again, and now I need to pass the children here. So let me say here, let me cut all of this from here and let me paste that here, and let me delete this generic list. Let me organize this and let's see what we have to do here. Here I should be receiving, this should be a function. Remember that children is a function in this case. So genres and buttons. So let me say here fragment, and let me put this t head and t body inside of this fragment, and now this is organized better. Now I need to import index entity, so let me import that, import index entity from utils / index entity. Now we have an error here because it is create URL like this. Okay, no problem. Now here we have genres and this, and here I have to use the buttons which I am receiving here. So let me say here buttons, which is a function, and the first parameter is edit URL. So let me pass genres edit / and here I can pass genre ID and also comma and the ID, so genre ID. And that's actually it. As you can see here, we have this index genres component, which is reusing almost all of the logic from our index entity component, and that even includes pagination. So let me say here Alt-Shift-O to remove the unused imports, and now let me go back to Google Chrome and let me refresh, and let's go to genres, and in here you can see that we have everything working. I can paginate, I can say records per page 10 or 5, and everything is working. And I can edit action 2, save changes, action 2, I can edit that back to action, and I can create a new genre, enter, and I can delete this. Aha, this is not working. Okay, so we have one mistake. So let's go back here and let's see what we did wrong. Let me go back to the index entity and let's see our custom confirm function. If I press F12 here, for some weird reason, it just got created here. No, I wanted to import an existing custom confirm function. So let me just do that by hand. So import custom confirm from custom confirm, save, and let's go back here and let me refresh. Let me delete. Okay, console, it works. Delete, delete, and the new genre was deleted. So this is working. In this video, we are going to work with the actor entity in our web API. We are going to create the entity, the DTOs, and also the table in the database. So let's come here and let's go to entities and let me add a new class. I'll call it actor. An actor will have several properties like ID. It will have a name. It will also have a datetime for the date of birth. We're going to say date of birth. Another one for biography. And finally, one for the picture. We're going to say picture here. We are using a string for the picture because here we're going to store the URL of the picture that we're going to save in Azure Storage. Now here I am going to put required control dot to bring this namespace, and also a string length. I will say 120 characters, and that should be it here. Now I have to go to the application DB context to configure the table for actors. So let me go to the application DB context, and in here I will put a DB set of actor, and I will say here actors. Now let me create the table. Let's go to the package manager console, and I will say add migration actors, enter, and this will create the actors table, and I can say update database, and this is done. Now I can start working with the DTOs. I need two DTOs, one for reading and one for creating. So let's go to DTOs and let me create the first class. I will say actor DTO, and here we're going to put these four properties and this, and we're going to have these four properties here, and this is fine. Now I have to create another DTO, but this one is going to be for creation. So let me say class actor creation DTO, and in here we're going to go back here, and I will copy this like this, and I will paste this here, and I will control dot here to bring this namespace. Though we are going to comment this out because we are not supposed to receive a string from the front end, because this is going to be a file, so it will be a iForm file, but we're going to do that later. For now, let's just have this and move on. Now we have to go to the AutoMapper profile class, so let's go there. Let's say AutoMapper profiles, and in here I have to make the same configuration but for actors, so I will copy this and paste it here. I will say actor DTO and actor creation DTO and actor. We also need to ignore the picture property in this binding. So let me say here picture, and I'll say options ignore. And the reason for this is that in actor creation DTO we're going to have an iForm file, and in the actor entity we're going to have a string, and there is no reason for me to map from iForm file to a string. And with this we're done here. Next we have to work with the controller. Let's create a actors controllers. I'll say actors controller, and I will inherit from controller base control dot, and I'll bring this namespace, and I will say here route API / actors and API controller. I will inject both the application DB context control dot to initialize it as a field, and also I want to have iMapper control dot using AutoMapper mapper and initialize it also as a field. Now let me work on the actions of this controller. We're going to say HTTP get public async task action result list actor DTO control dot and bring this namespace. I will say actors equal to await context actors to list async control dot to bring this namespace, and then I will say return mapper map list actor DTO, and I will pass the actors, and that's it. Now let's do the same for retrieving a single actor. I will copy this and I will paste it here and this, Now let me say here that I want to have a parameter. I'll say int, and here I will say ID, and I will return a single actor DTO, and here I will say var actor equal to await context actors first or default async xid equal to id. If actor is equal to null, then I will return a not found. Otherwise, I will return the mapping. I will say mapper map actor DTO, and I will say actor. And this is done. Now let's work on create. Let me say HTTP post. I will say public async task action result post from body, and we're going to say actor creation DTO, actor creation DTO, and I will say here throw new not implemented exception. We're going to implement this later, and the same for HTTP put. I will copy this and paste it here, and I will just say HTTP put and put here also, and that's it. Now let's go for delete. Let's say delete. I will say here a parameter, and I will say public async task action result delete int id, and here I will say var actor equal to, I can copy this actually. Let me come here and copy this code from here, and I will paste it here, and then I will say context remove actor, and then context save changes async, and I need to await this, await, and finally I have to return no content, so I will say return no content. And that's it. Now we have to work with creating an actor. We will see that next. But before we do that, we forgot to add in actor DTO the ID of the actor, so let me say ID here, and now let's continue. In this video, we are going to implement posting an actor from our React form into this endpoint that we have here. Now, remember that here in our React app, we are giving the user the ability to choose a file, a picture specifically. So we need to be able to receive that picture here in this post. For that, we have to change this from body to from form, because we're going to use form data. And let me say here return no content, because I want to do some testing before we get to work with inserting the actor in the database. Now, before we go to React, let me go to actor creation DTO, and in here, since we're receiving a picture, a file, I have to use not a string but an iForm file, which is a way to represent a file in ASP.NET Core. And that's it. Now we are ready to go back to Visual Studio Code and get to work. Here we are in Create Actor in our Create Actor component. So what I want to do is to come here and say async function create actor creation DTO, and let me import that. And then what I want to do is to use a try here and a catch here, error, and if error and error response, then I want to put into an array of errors. So errors here, set errors here, use state, and let me import this a string array, and this will be an empty array by default. And then below create actor, we're going to use our display errors component, and we're going to pass errors. Alright, so here we're going to say set errors error response data. Alright, so now we have to work with sending that information into our web API. Now remember that we will be using form data for this, so we need to do something different. What I'm going to do is that I will create a helper function that will transform this actor into a form data object. So let me go to the Explorer. I want to go to utils, and in here I want to create a new file which is going to be called form data utils.ts. This will be a simple file, not a component. And in here, I will create export function convert actor to form data, and I will receive an actor creation DTO, and I will return form data. I need to import actor creation DTO, so let me import that manually. So import actor creation DTO from actors model. Okay, so let's get to work. So here what we have to do is to say const form data, new form data. We're going to create a form data object, and we're going to return that form data object from here, but we need to populate it. So let me say form data dot append, and in here we're going to say name, which is the name of the actor, and then actor dot name. And this is more or less what we have to do. We have to pass the information from the object into the form data using append. So let me say here, if actor biography, then form data append biography actor biography. We have here an if because this could be empty, because biography is optional. I'll do the same for date of birth. If actor date of birth, then we are going to do the following. We need to use a special function for formatting the date into a year, month, day format. So let me say here function format date equal to new date. This is making sure that the date is in the correct data type. And let me put here date. Let me now say const format equal to new intl datetime format en year numeric month 2-digit and day 2-digit also, semicolon here. Now I will use some destructuring. I will say const value month comma comma. Notice that 2 commas here. Then value day comma comma again, and then value year equal to format to parts, and I will pass the date, and then I will return year dash month dash day semicolon here, and that's it. With this I am formatting the date. And now let's come here and let me say format append date of birth comma format date, and I will pass actor date of birth, and here we should have said form data. Then let's work with the picture. If actor picture, then form data append picture and actor picture semicolon here, and that's it. Now I can save, and I can use this function here, and in here I can say const form data equal to convert actor to form data, and I can pass the actor, and I can import this. So let me say here import this from utils form data utils. Then let's say await Axios control dot to import Axios, and I will pass an object to Axios because I need to say method post URL, and I need a URL. So let me go to endpoints, and in here I want to clone this and say URL actors, and here I want to have actors save, and I will use this and I will paste it here, and I will import that from endpoints, then data form data, and then headers and object content type colon multi-part slash form data. I told you we were using form data. Now after that I can say here const history. I will use the use history React hook so that we can help the user navigate outside of this component. So semicolon here, and history push actors semicolon here. Now I need to use this create function here in our on submit. So here I will say await create, and I will pass the values. And of course, I need to make this async so that we can use a wait here. And we are ready to make our test. It seems like everything should be okay. So let me first go to Visual Studio Code. Let me put a breakpoint here because I want to confirm that we are indeed receiving the picture of the actor. And let me copy this and paste it here just so that we don't forget later to use from form when we get to work with updating the actor. Of course, we will not be creating the actor now, but I just want to make sure that we're receiving the file. So let me press F5 to run this application in debugging mode. So here we have Swagger. Now let's go to Google Chrome here. Let me even refresh just in case. And let me say somebody like Tom Holland. This is just a test, so I can put whatever data I want. Picture. And let me look for Tom Holland. Here it is. Now let me say ASD and save changes. And here we are in Visual Studio. Let me hover over Actor Creation DTO. And we have here biography ASD, date of birth, name, and also this iForm file. Let me expand here. And as you can see, we have tomholland.jpg, which means that indeed we're receiving the picture selected by the user. Now, of course, we're not doing anything with that, but we have made a step in the right direction. In this video, we are going to learn how to store our images from our application in Azure Storage. Here we are in portal.azure.com, and here we are going to create an Azure Storage account. An Azure Storage account allows us to save files in the cloud. If you don't want to use Azure, you can store the images in your own application in the Web API. We're going to do that in the next video, but you still need to do the code of the Web API in this video. So keep watching this video anyway. So here we are, and I can click on storage account. If you don't see it here, you can always come here and say storage accounts and click on here. I will say add to create a new storage account. I will choose my subscription. In my case, it is Visual Studio Enterprise. I will select a resource group. A resource group allows us to have several Azure solutions in a group. This is useful because, for example, for our Movies API application, we're going to have our Azure Storage account, but also we're going to have a database server, an Azure App Service, and so on. So let's create a new resource group. I will say Movies API, and I'll say OK. We will give it a name. Let's try Movies API. It is available. In location, I will choose a location closer to me, which is East US. I'll leave a standard, general purpose, and this one. Let me go up. I want to go to advanced because I want to disable this. I want to disable this because I am in development, so I don't need this. And make sure that you have allow blob public access as enabled. Now with this, we are ready to hit on here and then create. And this is creating the Azure Storage account. Now, while this is working, I can go to Visual Studio and I can start working here. I need to install a new NuGet package, so let me go to Manage NuGet Packages and let me go to Browse, and I want to install Azure Storage Blobs. I will click on here and I will install this package. I will click on Accept and this is done. Now I can close this and I can come to here and I can come to helpers because first I want to create a new interface, so new item, interface, and I will call it iFile Storage Service at. I'll make it public and we're going to create 3 signatures. The first one, delete file, a string file route, a string container name, also task string, save file, a string container name, and iForm file, control dot, this, and file. And finally, task string, edit file, a string, container name, iForm file, file, and a string file route. And that's it. Now we have to create a class that implements this interface. So let's go here, right click here, add new class, Azure Storage Service is going to be the name. If you don't want to use Azure Storage, you can skip this step. If you want to use it, then follow along. Now we're going to implement the iFile Storage Service control dot implement interface, and in here we're going to implement these three methods. First, I need the constructor of the class because I need to get a hold of the connection string of the Azure Storage account. And talking about that, let's go back here to Google Chrome. The resource has been created. I'll click on here, then I'll click on Access Keys, and I will click on Show Keys, and this is the connection string that will allow me to upload files to the Azure Storage account. As you can see, I can copy the content here, and now let's go back to Visual Studio, and then let's go to the Upselling Development JSON file. Let me put a comma here, and I'll say Azure Storage Connection, and I will paste my connection string here. Now let me save, and now let's go back here, and then I will get iConfiguration control dot and make sure to click on the one from Microsoft Extensions configuration. Now let me put here private string connection string, and then I will say connection string equal to configuration dot get connection string, and let me paste here the name of this connection string, Azure Storage Connection, and let me paste it here. Now that we have the connection string, we can get to work. Let's come here to save file, and I will say var client equal to new blob container client control dot Azure Storage blobs. Then I will say connection string here and container name here. Then await client create if not exists async. This is going to create the container if it doesn't exist. A container in Azure Storage is like a folder that will allow us to group certain files together, just like a folder in our machine. In our case, we're going to have two containers, one for the pictures of the actors and another one for the posters of the movies. So let's continue. Let's say client set access policy, and I will say blob, then I will say extension. I want to get the extension of the file, so let me say control dot here system IO get extension, and I will say file dot file name. I'm doing this because I like to randomize the name of my file, so I will say file name equal to, and I will use a string interpolation, and I will use a git, and here I will say extension. Now I'll say blob equal to client get blob client, and I will pass the file name. Now I will say await blob upload async, and I will pass file open read stream. And finally I can return, because as you can see I am returning a string, I will return the URL of the file in the cloud. So I will say blob URI to a string, and that's it. With this we are saving the file in the cloud. Now let me go to delete file. Let's implement this method. I will say if a string is null or empty, file route, then I will return. What I'm doing here is that if the actor doesn't have a picture, then I am just returning immediately so that we don't continue with the method. And let me make this async. Now let's come here, and let me come down here. I will copy these two lines of code. Copy. I'll paste it here. Now let me say file name equal to path get file name, and I will get that from the file route. So I will say file route. Then I will say blob equal to client get blob client file name, and then I will say await blob delete if exists async. Now finally I will go to edit file, which is a utility method that will allow me to delete a file and then create a new one. This is useful for when we are updating a movie or an actor. Now let me say async because we're using the await operator. Then I'll say delete file, and I will send the file route and the container name, and then return await save file, and I will pass the container name and the file. And that's it. With this, we have created our Azure Storage Service implementation. Now we have to go to the startup class because we need to configure the dependency injection system so that it serves our iFile Storage Service. So let's say here services, add scope, then I will say iFile Storage Service control dot, let me bring this namespace, and then Azure Storage Service. And now let's come here to our Solution Explorer because I need to go to my Actors controller, and in here I need to inject my iFile Storage Service, File Storage Service, and if in the next video you want to use the capabilities of saving the files in your machine, then you should be doing this. So let's come down here, and now let's go to Post, and let me delete this, and let's get to work. Now here I will say var actor equal to mapper map. I will map to actor, let's say actor, control dot, bring this namespace, and I will pass the actor creation DTO. Then I will say if actor creation DTO picture is different than null, then I will say actor picture equal to await file storage service. What name did I give? Oh, I forgot to make it as a field. Now it is a field. Now let's go back here, file storage service, here it is. Now I'll say save file, and I will pass the container name, which is going to be actors, and then the iForm file, which is actor creation DTO picture. Now I don't like to have this string here hard-coded, so I'll have it here as a field, private read-only string container name, and I will just say here actors. Then I will take this and I will come back here and I will put this here. Now finally I have to say context add actor await context save changes async, and finally we are going to return no content, and we are good to go. Now we can press Ctrl F5 to run our application, and now let's go to our React application. Let me refresh just in case, and let me put here Tom Holland one more time. Let me put whatever date of birth. I will choose his picture again, and then ASD here, and let's click on Save Changes, and as you can see we were redirected back here. So now let me go to SQL Server Management Studio. Here we have Movies API, tables. In actors I can select top 1000, and as you can see we have this link here which I can copy and I can paste here, and I can open this, and as you can see here we have Tom Holland. In this video, we are going to store the images of our actors in our application. This is an optional video for those who don't want to use Azure Storage for saving files. So let's do that. First, let's go to the Solution Explorer, and I need to create a www.root folder in our solution. So right click here, add new folder, www.root, enter. And as you can see, this is a special folder. It even comes with its own icon. Now, I need to go to helpers because I need to create a new class that will implement our iFile Storage Service interface. So let me call it in app storage service, enter, and I will implement my iFile Storage Service interface control.implement interface, and let's get to work. I will use dependency injection because I need iWeb host environment control dot, and let me bring this namespace, env, and also HTTP context accessor, and I need to instantiate both as a field, so field this and field this also. Now let me come down here and let's work on the save file method. What we're going to do is that we're going to save our files into this www.root directory that we just created. So let me say var extension equal to path control.systemio.get extension file name, var file name equal to, we are going to say git new git for the file name, and also we are going to concatenate the extension here. Now let me say string folder equal to path combine, and I will say env web root path and container name. Container name in this case is going to represent a folder. I will say if directory exists, and I will pass the folder. If it doesn't exist, then I will create it. So directory, create directory, folder. Now let me say route path combine folder file name. Now I will use a memory stream, var memory stream new memory stream. Now I will say await, and I will say file copy to async, and I will pass the memory stream. I will say content memory stream to array, and we have an error here because we need to make this async. And now let me say await file dot write all bytes async, and I will pass the route and also the content. And this is already saved in the file. Now I need to construct the URL, so I will say URL, and I will say here HTTP context accessor. I need to have this here and this here. Now let me say HTTP context request scheme colon / and also HTTP context accessor, HTTP context request and host. And that's it. You can see it all on the screen. Now route for db equal to path combine. This is what we're actually going to store in the database. URL, container name, and also the file name. And we're going to replace / and a single slash backwards and return route for db. And that's it. Now let me work on the delete file method. I will say here if a string is null or empty, route, file route, return task, completed task, and I will say var file name equal to path get file name, and I will pass the file route. Then I will say var directory equal to path combine env web root path container name and file name. Then I will say if file exists, I'll say directory. This should be something like file directory. This is more clear. Then I will say file delete file directory. And finally return task completed task. And finally I have to implement this. I will say await, and this should be of course async in order to use the await operator. I will say delete file, and I will pass the file route and the container name, and then I will say return await save file, and I will pass the container name and also the file. And now we are done implementing this. Now we have to go to the Solution Explorer. Let's go to the Startup class because we need to configure the iFile storage service in the dependency injection system so it serves our in-app storage service. And also we need to come here, and let's come here and let's say app use static files. And also let's come here because I need to say here services at HTTP context accessor. And that's it. With this I can press Ctrl F5 to run our application. And in here we have our application. Let me go to our React application so that we can create another person, another actor like Samuel L. Jackson. Let me put a date of birth. Choose file. I'm looking for Samuel. Here he is. ASD. And save changes. Now let me go to SQL Server Management Studio F5, and here we have localhost 44347. Let me copy this and let's come here and let me paste that here. And as you can see, we have Samuel L. Jackson here, which means that indeed we were able to save our file into our www root directory, as you can see here. Now let me minimize this and let me change this back to Azure Storage Service because in my case I want to keep using Azure Storage. You are free to use the in-app storage service if you want.